part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
So love and light, guys. My name is Mariana Margal, and I am the official host of A through Y, The Process, where you are the Z. We're learning about all things entrepreneurship related, including a few fun anecdotes and stories from lively but yet inspiring guests. I can't wait to share stories soon.
Hi, everybody. It's John Tellage from the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Be sure to hop on with us to follow all the dramatic developments of the reigning American League Central Division champions. From game analysis to interviews to keeping tabs on who could be the next breakout star. We'll have that and much, much more right here. It's the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe here and join the fun.
Welcome to the Chase Smith Podcast, a conversation on current events and culture. We are proudly part of the Press Play Podcast Network, empowering diverse voices to launch professional, engaging podcasts. With me today, someone I've known for over a decade, and you listening, you've actually met him before. Mark and I recorded a podcast last year about faith and UFOs. One of my favorite episodes of podcasting ever. This is the host of Mark Explains, a podcast about the universe. He owns Thick Boy Fitness. He's a chemist and a geoscientist, and he's here to talk to us about the East Palestine Train Derailment. It's a town of roughly 5,000 people. Mark Shortt. Mark, dude, I still have people to this day, it just happened 2 days ago, come to talk to me about our faith UFO episode. That we might have to do a sequel. Although your whole podcast is almost a sequel to it.
Bro, I live in the world of weirdness. Also, that was the most professional intro I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, come on.
Dude, you have such a good radio voice. Holy cow.
Oh, geez. A lot of UFO, though, in 20. Is this the year of the UFO?
So I'm gonna put this out there.
Yeah.
I dropped a podcast, I believe it was February 4th. Do you remember the episode you did was with Tom?
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say. Go ahead. I know what you're gonna say.
And yeah, I call in look at hour and 20 into this conversation, we were talking about the ethics of dying. And not even kidding you. We got into the weeds of it was a really interesting conversation just about the ethics of dying. And like in the middle of this, I was just like, pause. We're hitting pause. I'm calling it. I feel like we're gonna have a UFO invasion this year.
That's what you said.
And I'm just making a prediction right now.
And then
4 days later, 4 UFOs were shot down.
Which one was the weather balloon? This was like a day before.
So the weather balloon was shot down. Oh, was it 3 after that? Weather balloon shot down. Then it was Alaska, Canada, Lake Huron, and no, there was 4 because it was South Carolina too. So there's 4 UFOs, not including the balloon.
Dude.
But at the same time, I'm just like, well, that wasn't really a UFO invasion, but I did kind of call it within.
Yeah, I mean, chalk it up as a win right there, man.
Well, I'm a prophet. I don't know if you know this.
Yes, yeah. I am not. Super fun episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's on my feed. It's on Mark's feed. Go check out Mark's podcast. Mark Explains. Was that a fair description about a podcast about the universe? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. I meet the most interesting people on this planet, and I want to talk and hear their stories. Sometimes we talk about the multiverse. Sometimes we just tell stories of things that happened in their lives. I want to hear from interesting people. That's what it's all about.
Well, you are very interesting. Mark, our stories are intertwined.
Yeah, they are.
And we still have another podcast to record, not tonight, because that's not the topic tonight, but
we do.
Our podcast about faith in the South and ministry in the local church.
Dude, I want to tell you the whole story of what happened at that church to me, because there's a reason I left.
Sure.
I don't think you do. You know why I left in the fashion I did?
No.
It is a wild story, bro.
Yeah.
It's a wild story.
when so okay, when I was hired there in North Carolina, I felt like a 5-year call.
Okay.
This is so off topic. I love
No,
it.
dude, let's dive in.
I don't want to dive in here because it's just not the space or time, and I'm not mentally ready for it. And so around year 3.5, me and Leslie started praying about what what happens after year 5. Do we plant root, and are we going to be North Carolinians, or is there something else? And Mark, we genuinely tried to like pursue planting root. We tried to start a family. We tried to buy a house. That was in the middle of like the housing market crash, and there was no reason why we shouldn't have been able to get a house. And like a lot of the friends we had then at the time, like you included, like a lot of our friends in our community were no longer either there or in our life. And so it was just all of a sudden, oh, maybe a lot of these outside forces is a way that we feel God leading us to not be here, right? Among other things. And so we decided to move to Chicago.
Yeah, I remember that.
And whenever we did, people in our community was like, "Oh, bless you all. Are you going there for missions? Are you guys going to be missionaries there?" We're like, "No, we're just going to live in Chicago." Like, that's not like. So anyway, if that's a little window into some worldview down there that.
Oh, it's interesting.
No, we're not going to Chicago to be missionaries. We're going there just to live there. But yeah, Mark, we have a conversation that isn't this episode, and I think we even teased it with our episode, with your episode.
Probably.
I'll
come down for that one.
Oh my gosh, please. That you teased me about coming down. A lot of teasing in our life, Mark. I just feel like there's just a lot of teasing going on.
I'm leaving the country in early April. So I'll make a plan to come down and we'll record. We'll just do a day. I'll drive down, record, and drive back.
I'm trying to do it soon. Dude, now you're like calling my bluff, and I'm like, I don't know.
Dude, literally, I'll drive down, we'll grab lunch, record a podcast, and leave. And the only reason why I said it is because in April when I leave, I'm going for a bit. I'm gonna be gone. I'm going over to Indonesia for a while. Nice. I wrote a book, but I have an idea for a second book, and I need to escape to go do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, tell us about your book. We are going to talk about East Palestine, I promise, but just things keep coming up that I want to hear about this book. You've been promoting it on your socials.
Well, I started the TikTok. Actually, this will be a good transition into it. I started the TikTok because I've been trying to get published as an author, but it's very difficult to get published as a first-time author if you write a book in a very niche subject field. Mine is a nonfiction. It's kind of narrative. It's not even a memoir. I kind of talk about the weirdness of the universe and all the weird things. I talk about UFOs. I talk about a lot of things in this book, the things that are strange and inconsistencies that we see every day and we consider normal, but they're obviously not normal. Well, what happens if you put them all in one book? What is the overarching theme? And that's what my book is about. It's called Pi. It'll be out this year. But I was trying to get published, and publishers are like, if you are a first-time author and you want to get published, you need 100,000 followers on some platform at a minimum. Sometimes even as many as like 250,000 followers. And I was like, I am a scientist and I'm trying to be an author, and I'm a chemist. I don't want to play the game. They're like, go get followers. And so I was like, you know what? Fine. I'm gonna go get followers. Yeah. So I started the TikTok on February 3rd. So this is like a month ago, month ago. I happened to start the TikTok the day of the East Palestine crash. That was that day, but I didn't know that at the time. I was just starting it. I released a couple of videos about, I read little excerpts from the book and this and that. And I'm just like, I got a couple thousand views, a couple hundred likes, but not any real traction or anything. And I was like, maybe I'll do reaction videos. That'll be funny. So I was scrolling science reaction videos where people would put up a science video. Yeah. And then I would respond to it. And there's idiots, man. There's idiots on TikTok, and they're making over in CERN, Switzerland. And I was like, okay, first of all, CERN is the European, it's not, there were so many things going on. So I was just doing these kind of sassy scientist reaction videos.
Uh-huh.
And then I came across a video of a girl and she was like, hey, I'm looking for a chemist. She's like, I'm going over the manifest of this East Palestine chemical spill. And her question was like, if perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA, has 8 carbon chains, and we know that there's a chemical on board called ethyl hexyl acrylate, and that has 11 carbons in its chain. We know that PFOA stays in our body for a long time. With 8, will the 11 chain carbon stay in longer? Like, that's kind of like this, it's logical thinking. And so I responded to that little clip. And I was like, hey, my name is Mark. I'm a chemist, and I'd love to break this down for you. And the video got 350,000 views in like a week. And I was like, holy Jesus. And so I was like, people are desperate for a good source of information.
Yeah.
And no one really knows what to believe. That's the problem here.
Yeah. So we live in Columbus, and just kind of monitoring this situation from, however many 100 miles away we are. And was like, you know what? I bet I'm not the only one who has questions or just has no clue what's going on. And I think I might have seen something you posted on Instagram about, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, Mark would be perfect to talk to, one, because I don't need an excuse to talk to you. I love talking to you, but you are a chemist and a geoscientist. And so you do know what's going on. And so it's like, Mark, dude, come on the pod. Let's talk about this. And you're like, yes, let's do it. And so can we just give like a timeline of what has happened in East Palestine and where we are on March 9th or 10th?
Yeah, it's been weird, man. So February 3rd, 38 cars spilled just east of East Palestine, like just a mile or two from the border of Pennsylvania and
in Ohio, and Pennsylvania and Ohio.
Yeah, in Ohio. And there was a lot of hazardous chemicals aboard. But the 3 that kind of get brought to the surface the most are the butyl acrylate, the ethyl hexyl acrylate, and then the vinyl chloride. Those are like the 3 you hear of. You don't even hear of the waste lube oil tanker, which is just, there was, I think, 2 tankers full of waste lube oil, which is basically like oil. And all of that spilled, and half of that was burned. So they were just literally burning oil. And there was propylene glycol, which is like a medium for vape like e-cigarettes, as well as other manufacturing goods. Then there was a couple of tankers of polyethylene, which is the precursor to a lot of plastics, and that was burned. There was a lot of these that aren't necessarily hazardous immediately, but when they burned the vinyl chloride, they also burned many of the other chemicals at the same time. So what happened was, something with the brakes, the train derailed. Upon the derailment, there were leaks to many of these cars, and a lot of these chemicals were spilling into the water and such. Immediately, they realized the vinyl chloride. So vinyl chloride is has a very low boiling point, so around 7 or 8 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, or minus 19 degrees Celsius for the people that use the metric system. And these temperatures are very low. So ambient temperatures, when vinyl chloride just spills into the ambient atmosphere, it's going to boil and steam off. So it'll go off as steam. So then vinyl chloride exists as steam. But vinyl chloride is very, very, very deadly to human consumption. So like 3 parts per million of vinyl chloride in your system can, it's very highly carcinogenic. It also causes brain defects, growth defects, issues with pregnancy, and all of those sorts of things. But it's also very unstable. It was spilling very slowly. And so they're like, we are afraid this is going to catch fire and blow up. So we need to do a control burn. And so if I was on site, I probably would have said the same thing. Like, you have to, it's going to go. So let's control when it goes. So, but they immediately were like, we need a 1 mile radius. We're going to evacuate the area because with the burning of vinyl chloride, it produces phosgene and hydrochloric gas, which if you're in the immediate area and you were to breathe that, you would, that is immediately lethal. You would die immediately from the phosgene. And then there was like a yellow or an orange area around where you would have severe health issues for a long time. But those areas that they were highlighting were big. They were like in the miles scale. So they burn it. And I'm sure you've seen the pictures. Like, those pictures are apocalyptic. They are ridiculous. I had no idea that's what vinyl chloride looked like when you burn a tanker of it. But here's the thing. They were also burning the lube oil, and they were burning the propylene glycol. They didn't try to, but that's what happens when you light a tanker of vinyl chloride on fire, is it burns everything else around it too, especially those things that are flammable. And so you don't just get the phosgene and the hydrochloric gas in the air, you also get the byproducts of all of the other things that are burning as well. So it was it's pretty crazy. The biggest talk right now everyone's talking about is dioxins and vinyl chloride, and everyone's concerned, which is funny for me. I'm like, the burn happened, it went into the atmosphere, it rained, acid rain along the East Coast, south and east, and then it just moved on. Like, my focus is on groundwater right now, and surface water contamination, and all of the news is talking about like vinyl chloride and dioxins, and I'm like, guys, you need to get on board here. That was 2.5 weeks ago. Like, that stuff is past.
So the effects of the controlled burn is this short-lived with the acidic rain.
Yep, acid rain. And
the more long-term effects, as you mentioned, would be what happens with the water that's in the earth. Mark, as I was hearing this going on, I grew up in Parkersburg, right in the Ohio River, across from Marietta, Ohio. I mean, you're talking DuPont, you're talking not Krypton, but Crichton or something like that. There's like these large like chemical factories. I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. That's what I'm trying to say. So whatever water, air contamination, I mean, they made documentaries, movies about like DuPont and all that they like pump into the air stuff. Leslie grew up in Circleville. There's a big DuPont plant there. I think a lot through the Mid Ohio Valley, there's just a lot of these kind of like chemical polymer places, words I don't even understand. But it's still absolutely terrifying. Right. I've heard this described as like a mini Chernobyl.
Yes. And as a scientist, that is what I've been saying. To kind of take you through like the cause of concern when it comes to the timeline of days and such. You have the atmosphere is going to move very quickly. The surface water is going to move a little slower. The groundwater is going to move much slower than that. And so when the vinyl chloride burned and all of those toxins went into the air, you're looking at days, but 2 to 3 days, and all of that atmosphere is often then into the Atlantic, and you don't have to worry about it. The surface water is different. The surface water is on the scale of days to weeks. So the surface water is going to be runoff, and I actually did a video of this talking about the different types of water and the movement and such. Like those people that were scraping the river with sticks, and then like the rainbow plume would come to the top, and stuff like that. And so I did a video on what we're seeing here. Like, why is this doing this? Like, this is a great question.
Looks very oily, just to the look.
Yeah, because one of the tanker cars was filled with benzene, and benzene is a byproduct of petroleum. So gasoline, your typical gasoline has 5 or 6 main components of like fuel for vehicles. But 2 of those are benzene and toluene. And if you were to spill gasoline in a parking lot and then it rains and you get that cool rainbow color, you've seen those things, right? In the parking lots.
Yeah.
What's happening there is water is actually pushing through the gasoline and separating the chemicals as it goes. And the refractionary indices of the chemicals, so how they refract light, is different. So toluene refracts light differently than benzene does. And so you end up with a rainbow because they're gonna pair right next to each other. So the benzene is going to be the purple and the blue and the red, and the toluene is going to be the yellow and the green. So you end up with this rainbow color, but those are actually indicative of a few different chemicals.
And people were seeing these just in creeks.
Correct, but they were seeing them after they scraped the bottom. And actually, I can explain kind of what happens here.
Or sorry, is it crick or creek? I don't know.
I say creek.
Creek. Okay, I say creek
I'm from
too.
Michigan. Yeah, I'm from. That's the correct pronunciation of that.
Okay.
So like the video that you see where people like drop a stone and then like the little bubbles of, it looks like oil, but it's not oil. It's actually benzene and toluene.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it looked very toluene to me.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're byproducts of petroleum. So like what's happening is like, why is it not on the surface? If it's lighter than water, then what's happening if you scrape it and it's coming to the surface? And what happens is, if you were to imagine a cross section to where you're looking and rain is falling down onto the surface, that rain is going to take three paths. And the first path that it's going to take is runoff, to where it just follows the surface of the earth.
The least resistant, right?
Yep. And that one's going to make it to the local waterways. So like lakes, rivers, tributaries, stuff like that. And that's going to happen in the time frame of like days. So 1, 2, 3 days, you're going to see a big push of runoff go to those local waterways. So the chemicals within the first 1 to 3 days, there was a big push. You get a big spike of chemicals in the water, and then that plume kind of passes on. And then the second path is where the water, those chemicals, they permeate. Well, in this case, we're talking about rain. So the water would permeate into the ground a little ways. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 feet down. And then it kind of turns lateral, but it still wants to make it to the waterways. So this is ground or shallow water hydroconductivity. And hydroconductivity is just a fancy word for, that's the ease of fluid through a medium or a soil. So if something has a high conductivity, then it's going to have a high rate of flow, and that's measured in feet per day. In the East Palestine area, the rate of flow is between 10 and 50. I'm guessing in the area that they were, it's probably around 25, 10 to 25.
And that's groundwater hydroconductivity.
Yep. Hydroconductivity, the ease of flow of a fluid through a medium or a media. You have to think, in East Palestine, you have sand and gravel as the main media for the top layer of all the media above. It's called above the confining layer. So your water table, your groundwater source, and then all of the soil on top of that, all the way up to the surface. That's all going to be like sand and gravel in East Palestine. And the groundwater travels between 10 and 25 feet per day. That's the rate of travel that it's going. In my mind, I'm like, that's super fast for groundwater. But this tells me a few things, that the contaminants, when they go into the ground, they're also going to travel in that same time frame. So that means if the groundwater level, the water table, which is the top of the aquifer, the unconfined aquifer right there, that the groundwater level is between 30 and 40 feet. So let's just say for fun, it's 40 feet. That means if it's traveling at the slowest rate, which is 10 feet per day, and it's at the deepest level, which is 40 feet, that means those contaminants are going to make it there within 4 days. And that means they're all the way 40 feet down. Once they hit that groundwater level, that water table, they disperse. And once they hit that, it is impossible to remediate this stuff. So, and we are seeing like remediation tactics right now where they're digging a bunch of soil up. And what they're doing is they're worried about the smell. They're trying to give false hope to the people of East Palestine. So the smell of the soil is so bad right now, it's making people sick. People are coughing. It's 100% because of all of those really volatile components that spilled into the soil. And so they're literally digging up about 10 feet of soil, between 10 and 15 feet of soil, and they're putting dirt on top of it. They're basically just masking the smell. And what they're telling people is that they're removing contaminated soil and it's going to be safe soon. But what they're not telling the people is that these contaminants have already reached the groundwater, and it is that like these efforts are futile. Like, and I talk about this in the video, trying to remediate the soil at this point in time is akin to trying to put out a house fire with a glass of water. It's completely futile. It's pointless. It's a show. It's to give people false hope, because at the same time that they're doing this, the governor of Ohio has also requested emergency medical assistance from the CDC for the next 6 months, and has set up shelters at the local churches in East Palestine, because he knows that people are going to be seeing the effects from these things very soon.
It's wild, man. So let's say this, Mark, if you were a resident of East Palestine, what would be your courses of action right now?
Leave. You have to leave. There's no other course. But I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is, because there's still more things that are going on here. Because so now it's been 34 days to this point, which means on a bad day, this is traveled around 300 to 400 feet. And on a good day, you're looking at 800 to 1,000 feet. So you're looking at the shallow water ground hydroconductivity. This is traveled, in the meters, the hundreds of meters, 300 or 400 meters is how far this is traveled in the ground. But that's a month. And this is only groundwater. This is not surface water. We're not talking about what it spilled into the local waterways, because now this groundwater is making its way towards the Ohio basin, and it's going to be leaching into the ground or into the local waterways as it goes. But it also is going to keep going down and further down into these groundwater aquifers. And a lot of people were asking, like, is my groundwater connected to, I live 15 miles south, I live 20 miles north, I live, 60 miles east. Am I going to be affected? Like, that's the biggest question. And ultimately, it's a hard question to answer, because groundwater is very complex. But you have to look on the scale of years to decades, not days to weeks, because groundwater moves very slowly. Now, the surface water in the Ohio River Basin, that the contaminants have already made it to the Mississippi and down into the Gulf, the first big plume. But now we're going to see trace permeations from the groundwater get back to the waterways over time. And so it'll be leaching these chemicals into the Ohio River for the foreseeable future. Now, the levels will be low enough to where it probably won't be dangerous, but that's also depending on where you are down the line of the Ohio River. If you are in Columbus, you're probably safe. But if you are in Negley, Ohio, which is 2.5 miles south of East Palestine, you are safe now, but in about a year to 2 years, you won't be safe. So it doesn't travel very far, very fast. But once it reaches where you are, there's nothing that can be done.
Nothing that those residents of Negley, Ohio can do in a year or two to try to remove any chemicals or make their water safe.
Well, you can't stop groundwater from traveling. Like, we don't have any tactics to try to steer groundwater, because it's also kind of it's hard to, like, these are just projected models too. This isn't like hard science and data. This is like, the water is likely moving in the southwest direction from East Palestine underground, and it's likely moving around 25 feet a day. And it's likely at this point. So, but like, we're making guesses, because we can't go and drill a monitoring well every 10 feet in every direction. That's the only way you would actually know, is you have to drill thousands of monitoring wells, but you can't do that. So it's just the best guess. Yeah. And we do know how groundwater moves, and we do understand that groundwater projection is a thing, but it is probably headed in the southwest direction because it wants to make it to the Ohio River Basin. It's probably headed in the rate of about 25 feet per day. And we know that Negley, Ohio, as the crow flies, is about 10 to 12,000 feet away. So you just do the math, and that's between 400 and 600 days before it reaches there. So we're looking at about 1.5 to 2 years, and the groundwater will make it So those aquifers are connected. They're kind of like a honeycomb, and some won't, some will be isolated and but some will make it through. And that's because that's just the way groundwater works, because it's all connected, but all water wants to make it to the ocean. So it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going and keep going and keep going. So like the people that are like, I'm 15 miles away, I'm in the southwest direction, how much time do I have? And I'm like, well, 15 miles seems close, but you're probably good for 5 or 10 years. But here's the other thing: in 5 or 10 years, people aren't, and actually in 1 year, people aren't going to remember this. A lot of people are already forgetting about it. And the reason why is because the level of severity that is happening here is so intense, and the government understands that. And those that run the media understand that. And so instead of talking about the severity of the people in East Palestine, they shoot down UFOs. And they say, look at that shiny thing over there, because the UFOs happened within 2 or 3 days after this event. And now that things, the Norfolk Southern, the train company, has re-upped on their relocation allowance for the people in East Palestine, because it's so bad there right now. So that they relocated them temporarily, and then they're like, okay, come back. And now they're doing it again because it's so bad. And they're like, okay, now come back. And I'm like, you don't understand. East Palestine is not going to be livable for much longer, probably on the scale of like 3 to 6 months. And then they are going to have to evacuate everybody in the entire town. And it is going to turn into a desolate city, because once these chemicals, and specifically, it's the acrylates, the butyl acrylate and the ethyl hexyl acrylate. And once those reach the groundwater, those chemicals are miscible. So they're hydrocarbons, but they're miscible with water. And it doesn't mean they're going to mix with water. It means they're going to interact, they're going to live with the water. And once that happens, there's no removing it. Like if you were to pull that out of your well, there's no filter that can get rid of that. And it's also, it has no smell to it. It has no color. It has no odor. It has no taste. So you don't even know it's there. And I know this sounds scary. I don't want to instill fear into people. I want to empower people with information.
Yeah.
And really the only information that I have for the people of East Palestine is you have to leave now.
So if they don't, in 3 to 6 months, when you said it's not livable, then someone will die and it will be traced back to this?
Likely that's already probably happening.
Wow.
And the reason why I say that is on Friday, this past Friday, the EPA did 14 groundwater samples. So we're looking at just about a week ago. They did 14 groundwater samples around the site as far as 2 miles away. 9 of the 14 were already showing trace amounts of these levels, which means these chemicals are already in the groundwater and they're coming up now. And now they painted a picture like we did recognize trace levels of the chemicals, but they're far below exposure and dangerous levels. And in my mind, as a scientist, what that says is, hey guys, the first bit of this chemical is now reaching these testing spots, which means more is coming. Like we are about, like that's just the tip of the spear. That's all that they're measuring. And so they're trying to assure people like, oh, the levels are below dangerous health levels. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I've been saying this from day one, from absolutely day one. If the moment those chemicals are measured, it's only downhill from there. And honestly, that was faster than I was expecting. That was, 30 days
people
out.
don't realize the scale of the wreckage. 38 cars with not just like a little like big gulp size, like tubs and gallons of these chemicals. And it's hard to imagine just how much is, dude, it is very, very depressing to think about. You start thinking about the quantity and the amount, and
well, it's over. You got to think one tanker car, just depends on the tanker car. You're looking at 20 to 40,000 gallons of a certain product. And so we had, 3 tankers of benzene go over. We had 2 tankers of propylene glycol. We had 2 of polyethylene. We had 2 of ethyl hexyl acrylate. We had 2 of vinyl chloride. So we're looking at 500 metric tons of chemicals that went into the environment. Some of these chemicals is on the parts per billion that will kill you. So you got to think when you have a filter And the filter says, this filter filters out, let's say vinyl chloride for an example. This is a great example. This filter filters out 99.99% of vinyl chloride or any VOCs, right? And a VOC is a volatile organic compound. Vinyl chloride is very volatile. So it filters out 99.99%. Well, 0.1% by volume of vinyl chloride is deadly to humans. And it's actually deadly on 3 orders of magnitude. So you got to think 3 parts per billion kills you, or 3 parts per million kills you.
Yeah.
And 0.01% is 1 part per 100, right? So you got to think it's 0.0003%, or that'll kill you, 0.0003%. So a filter that filters out 99.99% of VOCs doesn't touch the toxicity level for these chemicals. So if you have these, like everyone's asking, like, will an RO filter work? Will a carbon filter work? And I'm like, no, nothing will work. You have to leave. And then people are like, what if I boil it? Because everyone's asking, should I boil the water? Absolutely not. Because if these chemicals are in the water and you start to boil, 2 things can happen. 1, you can agitate all of these chemicals and aerate them into the air, and then you're breathing them in. 2, you can distill the water. Like that is an option, because the boiling temperature for some of these chemicals are higher than water. So you boil the water first, you get distilled water. But then you're left with all of these chemicals in a flask under heat. And something can happen called the polymerization, where they start to turn into other chemicals, and you're left with a much harsher environment, and you can end up killing yourself immediately. So do not boil the water.
Right now, the main concern is East Palestine and the immediate area around there.
Correct.
The danger
Correct.
for everyone else outside of that area has passed for now.
Well, as far as the air contamination and the acid rain, yes, that is passed and that is done. How that acid rain affects the soil and the ground and farm life, agriculture, and cattle, and so I have no idea. I'm not an agriculturalist. I'm not a horticulturalist. I don't know. I'm not a farmer. I know that the acid rain can affect the pH, but there are remediations for that, and filters can filter out some of those VOCs. It can.
Yep. So,
but as far as the immediate area of East Palestine and the water runoff, that will go down the Ohio River, and that can affect the people downstream. By the time it reaches the Mississippi, it's probably diluted to the point to where it's going to be below those trace levels and probably safe for human consumption. But it's hard to know because they're not testing. Why are they not testing? Because they don't.
The Ohio River has never been safe for anything. Let me tell you, man. I grew up on that thing. Has anything like this ever happened before? Like,
yeah.
Do you have any, like, tell us how that went?
This is nothing new. Okay. I mean, for an example, there's a small town in northern upstate New York where something similar happened in the late 1970s. Gosh, I'm not gonna remember the name of the city right now.
Is it Roy?
Solara?
Okay.
No, something like that. Upstate New York, where something happened similar, and it was ethyl hexyl acrylate, and the people are still testing to this day these chemicals in their groundwater, and the area is unlivable. So like this is nothing new. Like, we know that this is going to happen, and the railroad companies, they anticipate stuff like this to happen. So they do the very minimum amount that they can to pay off. And I mean, like, I have a lot of conspiracies on what I think actually is going on behind the scenes, because the EPA should never have given the okay for these people to go back and live in East Palestine. That is absolutely absurd. The chemicals, see, like, what happened is the chemicals spilled.
Right.
And then they went into the homes and they checked the water and like, no, your water's safe. And me, a scientist, I'm like, duh, it's safe, because if you're getting your water from a groundwater source, and I walk outside and I take a cup of gasoline and I dump it in your front yard, and then I walk inside and I test your tap water.
Very nice.
It's not going to have it in your tap water yet, because it takes time for that gasoline to permeate down to the groundwater level. So what they did was they tested the water right away, and then they stopped testing. And they're like, nope, your water's safe. You're good to go. And I'm like, you guys are absurd. Why are you saying this? And then I was like, oh, because the EPA also has these regulations in hand that say, it is at the responsibility and the fault of the company. If there's a train derailment, it is at the responsibility of the company at hand in order to provide relief to the people and or relocation. And so at the severity of this level, they know how severe this is. It is cheaper to pay off government officials to say that the water is safe than it is to relocate an entire town. Like 4,700 people relocation, you're looking on the scale of billions of dollars, probably $1 or $2 billion. But to pay off a few government officials to say the water is safe is probably on the scale of tens of millions of dollars. So you're looking at, 10,000 orders of magnitude, right? So, that is, I have no basis for that claim, but I do understand groundwater well, and I do understand groundwater science well, and I do understand water quality, and I do understand the severity of this. And I'm in Michigan. I'm not even down there. So the fact that I can look at that and say, what in the hell is going on with these people? Why would they ever say this is safe? Is absurd to me. And then I'm like, oh, it's probably has to do with money. And that's probably what it ends up coming back to.
Is there anything we can do about it, Mark? Is there anything that you or I can do about this disaster in East Palestine?
Help the people move. That's all we can do. It's clear that help is not coming from the government. It's clear that help is not coming from Norfolk Southern. The people will end up relocating either way. It's going to happen by choice or by force. And I have a GoFundMe in my TikTok bio because I'm trying to help people. All the proceeds, everything that I make from TikTok right now, I'm donating. I have a goal for $1 million, which is to give 100 people $10,000, which is it's 100 people. There's 4,700 people living there. It's literally nothing, but I feel like I can help somebody, right? That's my whole goal. Is I'm like, I mean, $10,000 is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket, but maybe it'll get them out of there and help start a new life somewhere. Maybe they can get an apartment somewhere. I don't know, but the people must leave, because you can't shower in this water. You can't do your clothes. You can't do your dishes. You can't touch it at all. That's the level of severity that we're going at here.
Well, that is wild. And you hear these things, and it's just hard to know. It's hard to know. There's not a lot of information out there. It's talked about, and then just the cycle of news, and then it's not talked about. And you mentioned something that I think is, terrifying, is that people are going to forget about this in 3 months,
yes,
in 6 months.
Well, they already kind of forgetting about it, because I run this is what I've been covering, and it's not gaining as much traction as it was even a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And the reason why is because there's, there's cartels down in Mexico that are killing 4 Americans. And I'm like, Mexicans abduct Americans. There's like some 1,200 every year. I was like, why are we focusing on this? And I was like, oh, because Norfolk Southern has now re-upped, and they realize how severe this is. We got to distract the people, put shiny objects in the sky. Let's focus on the cartels down in Mexico. Let's do everything we can, but not focus on the actual issues that are going on in our country.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too far into those weeds at this time of night with this episode, but Mark, I am so grateful that you came on, man, and just kind of shared your knowledge with us. It was incredibly insightful. And I want to look and see what we can do to help people in East Palestine. I don't know anyone in East Palestine, but I know a lot of people in Cleveland. It's not super, far, but maybe see if I can reach out and find someone. You're by Flint, Michigan, so water, concerns. It's nothing new for you, man.
I do want to reiterate, and my goal in all of this is not to instill fear. It is to empower people. If I can give you all of my knowledge, if I can give you good information, then you can make a better decision. And that is really what's going on in my life and in all of my work. It's why I don't charge anything. This is zero cost to consumer information about science. And if I can give you really good information at a very base level that you can understand, then you can make a better decision about your life. And that is why I'm here.
Yeah. Mark, where can we find your stuff, find your TikTok, your podcast, where we can listen and learn more from you as you talk about this stuff, man?
Everything is Mark Explains. On all the platforms, it's Mark.explains. So on TikTok, Mark.explains, and Instagram and Facebook. On Spotify and all the podcasts, wherever you find your podcast, it's just Mark Explains. And I think there's like little parentheses and it says the universe. It's like a blue cartoon character. You'll see me. I made that image like 5 years ago and I'm still running with it. And I love it.
It's good stuff, man. So go check it out. I'm going to include the link to his podcast in the show notes here. Mark,
come subscribe to the TikTok, because subscriptions make money and I can send that money to the East Palestine, Ohio people.
All right. I'll also do the TikTok link in the show notes too. Mark, dude, it's great to talk to you. I want to give you a hug, man. I need a Mark Shortt hug. That's what I need. There it is. There it is. And I wish I could give all of you guys hugs who listened to this episode. Thank you so much for downloading and listening. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this possible. You can follow us online at Press Play Pods. Visit our website at pressplaypodcast.com to keep up with all of our shows, news, and network sponsorship information. Mark, love you, man. I miss you, and I can't wait to, dude. If we do this in April,
we're doing it.
I gotta mentally prepare for that episode. That's gonna be big.
Prepare. It's coming.
All right, buddy. Hey, love you, man, and we'll talk
soon.
Love you,
dude.
All right. Peace.